I am like a fangirl of the design challenges that the NASA's Office of STEM Outreach, and I think you could ask, every student that's ever participated, and you would get a slightly different answer. I know what kind of bubbles to the top, or like what we hear over and over again. Mainly, it's the joyful experience of working with what become like very good friends over a long period of time. And then the students really just not knowing that they were capable of these things.
The NASA Suits Challenge directly engages students with authentic NASA mission scenarios, and the solutions these teams have created could help shape the future of space exploration.
3, 2, 1, Cosmolitis!
You need it for that positive energy.
All right, you got the charger, the mouse, we're good? All right. Gonna get in the camper lunar rover here.
Anyway, I had a great time networking with people, talking to people, and I would 1000% do it again. So if you're here and you want to join, you go with Trust State, you totally should join CosmoShox. Okay, thank you. Dude.
More bugs.
Another thing that was really cool was networking. I got to talk to some really cool people and just different aspects of NASA that you don't really think about, right?
For the eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon, and to the planets beyond.
This is The Space Shot, episode 443, From Wichita to the Moon, Team CosmoShox and the 2025 NASA Suits Design Challenge. I'm John Molnix. This is a very special episode for me, since I was on the 2025 Wichita State CosmoShox team. I also got to travel to Houston for Test Week at Johnson Space Center, and that experience was an absolute blast. And I just want to say thank you again to the incredible NASA employees and contractors who made that Test Week an unforgettable experience. 10 student teams from across the United States converged on Houston, Texas in May for a lunar-inspired design challenge and a shot to test our designs at NASA's Johnson Space Center, specifically the Planetary Analog Test Site, also known as the Rock Yard. This episode is going to be a bit different than normal, and that's all the preamble I've got today. So with that, let's get to this episode.
I have to push that. Okay, let me get it. That's all right. I'll wait till you're ready. Okay. Make it. Yeah, I got it. Okay, let me get the other thing done. Bob, this is Gene, and I'm on the surface. And as I take man's last step from the surface back home for some time to come, but we believe not too long into the future, I'd like to just let what I believe history will record that America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow.
It's been 53 years since humans last walked on the moon during the Apollo program. The audio you just heard was of astronaut Gene Cernan, audibly tired as he completed the third and final EVA, or extravehicular activity, during the final Apollo mission. Cernan spent over 73 hours on the lunar surface during Apollo 17 with his crewmate, geologist Harrison Schmitt. The pair explored the Taurus Littrow highlands while command module pilot Ron Evans orbited above. While the future of human exploration was uncertain in 1972, the crew of Apollo 17 could have never imagined that it would be over a half-century before humans would return to the world we had just barely touched. Now, in 2025, it's nearly time for humans, the crew of Artemis 3, to return to the surface of the moon to explore the lunar South Pole.
And as we leave the moon and Taurus Littrow, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return, with peace and hope for all mankind. Godspeed to crew of Apollo 17. Roger, Gino. Thank you very much.
Why the lunar South Pole? It's because this part of the moon is home to craters that could house materials left untouched since the early days of the formation of our solar system. The scientific possibilities of exploring this part of the moon are only one part of the why behind our return to our closest celestial neighbor. Pushing the boundaries of what's possible with space technology brings back benefits for those of us here on Earth. There are more Apollo spin-off technologies than I can fully recount here, but three that jump out to me are flame-resistant textiles, originally for spacesuits and vehicles, which are now used in firefighting garments, water filtration systems, which now help bring safe water supplies to people around the world, and fluid recycling chemical processes, which help remove waste from fluids, and they have improved how kidney dialysis machines function. A myriad of technological benefits have come from NASA since the agency was founded in 1958. If you ever want to go down a rabbit hole, look up NASA spin-offs, and I'm pretty sure I've just saved you from boredom for a couple of weekends at a minimum. The Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Skylab, Shuttle, International Space Station, and countless robotic and scientific missions have led generations of people in America and around the world to pursue careers in STEM fields. These missions have also inspired normal, everyday people. I think I've lost count of the number of times I've seen a NASA t-shirt or bag or ball cap while I'm going about my daily life. I wonder, how often do you see a NASA meatball or a NASA worm logo as you go about your day? And that's why these NASA design challenges are so important. They help inspire and build the high-tech, skilled workforce of the future. As part of the effort to return to the moon, NASA sponsors a number of student design challenges. The one that we're talking about in this episode is the SUITS, or Spacesuit User Interface Technologies for Students Design Challenge. SUITS is a challenge that brings students from across the country together to design user interfaces. In 2025, teams were paired together with one team working on a user interface for a pressurized lunar rover, while the other worked on a heads-up display for an augmented reality headset. The designs that these 10 student teams created for the 2025 SUITS Design Challenge could help inform interfaces for future human missions. NASA design challenges give students an opportunity to build and test software and hardware while gaining insights from NASA mentors and design evaluators. And crucially, this challenge also meant that teams had to collaborate across country to ensure that their separate designs would work and talk to each other during test week.
Does anybody else have any questions, any clarifications you want from us? Or we'll be right there.
3, 2, 1,
You need it for that positive energy.
It's hard to believe that test week has come and gone. The frenetic pace of test week, traveling on a Sunday, checking in, briefings and talks at Johnson Space Center, late night tests at the Rock Yard, then an early morning tour, visiting the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, checking out historic mission control, getting to see the actual mission control that they're using for International Space Station missions, and also somehow managing to catch a plaque hanging ceremony for one of the flight controllers, which was an incredible experience. That week was non-stop learning and fun. But there was a lot of build-up to test week. It took months of preparation for Team CosmoShox to get to the point where we could go down to Johnson Space Center and test our design.
Hi, I'm Maggie Schoonover. I'm director of the OpenXR Lab and faculty with the College of Innovation and Design at Wichita State University. And I'm the lead faculty advisor for the Wichita State NASA SUITS team, which I've led since 2020. I was actually talking to somebody about this earlier in the week, where it feels like almost like the before times and the after times. So if you think about like BC and AD, I think of it as like before suits and after suits, and especially like before test week and after test week, because you can really watch how students grow over the course of the 9 months of the challenge, or at least like the 6 months by the time you get to test week. And then they grow, in my opinion, almost that much more over just those 5 days in Houston. I remember I was talking to Dameron at one point. I think I told him, it must have been like January, February. He's like, well, we're halfway through suits now. I was like, no. We're not halfway through suits until like the week before test week. I am like a fangirl of the design challenges that the NASA's Office of STEM Outreach puts on. Just because it's always been hard for me to try to concisely explain like the value of suits. And I think you could ask, every student that's ever participated and you would get a slightly different answer. I know what kind of bubbles to the top, or like what we hear over and over again. And mainly it's just the joyful experience of working with what become like very good friends over a long period of time, and then the students really just not knowing that they were capable of these things, of building these kinds of cool products, and then being able to interface with experts at NASA. You can speak for your own experience, John, but like just I like watching everyone's faces when we get down to Johnson Space Center, and just kind of like the awe and the overwhelm. It's like, we made it, like we're here. And it takes all week for you guys to believe that you deserve to be there also. And so it's just very, very hard to recreate that kind of experience with other programs. Like I wish that we could take every student down there. We obviously can't. But for those students that do get to go, it's such a formative experience that it's, I've had some students say that was a life-changing experience, and it would have been for me too if I had that in college. And so that's why I love doing it and making that available to students, because I do often wonder, like, if I had a suits experience in college, like how different would my career look, or how different would my perspective on what I was capable of be. And that's kind of fun to know that I can provide that for students now.
Speaking of unique perspectives, Team CosmoShox is also one of the most interdisciplinary teams to participate in the Suits Design Challenge. Since 2020, nearly 60 students have been part of the CosmoShox team, with 8 colleges represented. Everything from aerospace engineering to game design, graphic design, human factors, biomedical, innovation and design, exercise science, and industrial engineering, just to name a few.
So challenges like suits, which are very multifaceted, they require an interdisciplinary set of skills. So I find them very important and very valuable, especially being in an interdisciplinary college, because we have an opportunity to show students, like, this is what your job could look like, and this is what the expectations will be professionally, is that you do know how to talk to somebody outside of your discipline, and you do know how to tell the story of what you're doing and why. And based on my professional experience and other colleagues that I have, and even friends of the college that will come in and talk to students, that is a daily issue. You can get paid millions of dollars to help a company solve tech spread issues, and it won't work if you cannot figure out how to message your goals or your vision to, C-level in that company. And so that comes back down to, making sure you have a shared vocabulary, making sure that you can tell the story, making sure that the value proposition and what matters to the end user, whoever that is. So that could be your lead developer, that could be your CIO, that could be the customer, like buying the product, that messaging is spot on. And so when we get students coming into the Suits program every year, one of the first things that comes up is vocabulary. And so we realize that our computer programmers, which is not necessarily computer science students, we have all kinds of students that do programming, like game design, aerospace engineering, all of that. And our graphic design students or art students don't have the same vocabulary, especially around things like documentation. So every single year we have to be like, what does documentation mean to you? And there's like 3 different versions of what that is. And so for like a coding student, documentation is something that you put in the code to understand, what the code block means and like what the intent was. Whereas a design student would maybe use the term style guide, things like that. And so realizing really quickly that having a shared vocabulary is important, and that the words that you can't assume that everybody knows what you're saying, is a really big learning outcome from something like Suits. So I think having these interdisciplinary STEM challenges, even for really, really simple, just communication, team building aspects, it's one of the best ways that I have to demonstrate, like show that to students outside the classroom. We also regularly have students asking for projects like this because they have a lot of in-class projects, but they don't have these opportunities that are a little bit more professionalized, that are harder, that span a longer period of time, that are as real world as possible. I would say the third thing is a lot of students say that this is the first time they've worked with anybody outside of their department. Yeah, so the importance to Wichita State is the applied learning aspect. So Wichita State, being an urban serving university in the middle of the country, applied learning is one of the pillars, and this is like in my mind 100% an applied learning opportunity with both product development and research and design. So basically anything that you can think of that you'd be doing in industry, you would be doing in the Suits Challenge. And you get to collaborate with students outside of your major. And because you're kind of stuck in this formative experience together for 6 to 9 months, you make really good friends. I think it's important to note that, so Suits actually does not give us any funding for these things. We have to seek that funding in lots of different ways. So we do get some grants. We have some donations from the College of Innovation and Design. And then Kansas being an EPSCoR state, there are some funds available through this state space grant for student travel experiences. And so all those things combined have helped us basically piecemeal this program together and be able to pay for our students to go to Test Week, which is especially important for a school like Wichita State because a lot of our students would otherwise not be able to attend Test Week.
A big part of Test Week was the time that we had at the Rock Yard on Monday and Wednesday nights. During this time, we met with our NASA design evaluators and were able to test our interface in a simulated mission environment at a facility that NASA uses for actual mission training. A huge thank you to Kai and Alex for being our design evaluators Monday and Wednesday. That entire process was an unforgettable experience for the entire team. The Planetary Test Analog Site, also known as the Rock Yard, is where all 10 teams converged on for test nights. During downtime, we got to take some pictures and walk around the simulated Martian and lunar environments. There was even giant spotlights set up to simulate the extreme lighting conditions that will be present at the lunar South Pole. Finally, a bit after 11 p.m. on that first Monday, it was our time to test.
So I guess you said this was new this year because I don't remember any of this last year. I don't think I remember talking to anyone else about anything. They used to have everybody do their own, everybody was on the exact same challenge, and the 10 teams were making the exact same thing, but now it's 5 teams are making the exact same thing, and they're working with another 5 teams that are making the exact same thing, and we have to work with them. So we were paired with Columbia when they accepted our proposal. And so for the next semester, that was one of the goals of the entire challenge this year was to be able to get our systems.
That's really awesome. Yeah.
Because we'll have 2 monitors. I'll put one on one screen, on the other, and then there'll be a third monitor for dust.
But basically, you're saying that EV1 will show up in the screen right here.
Pretty much. So you'll see their feed there. Okay. Okay. And that's about it for the EV monitoring tab. So you can go ahead and click up here when you're ready. So this is the PR navigation tab. This right here
are there 2 vehicles?
So PR is the one that we're inside of dust. So this is going to be the pressurized rover. The LTV is the little guy out here somewhere on the field. Okay, I don't see him right now.
He was all the way over there. Oh, he might be
little guy's probably behind the silo. So you can see the location.
Hi, I'm Dameron Cook. I am a game design major here at Wichita State University, I was team lead, product owner, and technical lead for the CosmoShox at Wichita State University, and I did a lot of software engineering for our project with NASA Suits. When we first started Suits, Brian Foster, he's our professor, he reached out to me personally. He said, hey, I think you'd be a good fit for this project, and I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't think any of us really knew what it was going into it as far as that goes. It's like, I know it's some Unreal Engine related and I have a lot of skills there and I'd like to push it further, and this seems like a good way to build on those skills. It kind of became clearer and clearer that it's going to be like more of a UI project, and like, okay, I can get familiar with Unreal Engine's UI tools. There's a lot of built-in stuff we can use to make something cool, and then like, but first we had to do that whole like proposal phase of like, can we make something decent, and like, can we prove it to them? And that was like kind of a large part of that was like figuring out like, okay, how do I work with a team to like make something like everybody's happy with, because that's like its own skill in of itself, making something as a team together that is quality and it's something we all agreed on, this is the direction this thing is going, and like, how do we apply the feedback that we got from everybody. That was all of its own sort of skills that we had to kind of, I think a lot of us were picking up along the way as we went. Personally, like out of team lead, it was really just, I'm going to be in this environment like every day, like in the like thinking about agile and thinking about what everybody else is doing and how it's coming together. You know, I was pretty much doing like 5 hours a day or 4 hours a day, 5 days a week or something on this, and like that like really just like got me into that discipline mode of like, this is what a product owner does, and like I was just there every day working in it. And with that discipline, I think I was able to walk away with a lot more confident in my skills as like far as like working with people and making something. I literally had like an interview 2 weeks ago, and like the entire time I was talking about being a part of a team rather than like anything like technically specific, because you know, most people don't want to work with somebody who can't work together. So like, even if you aren't like the strongest technically skilled person, even though I've picked up a lot of technical aspects from this, it's better to be somebody who can work with other people, because they're going to have to put up with you every day, right? So you want to have that skill working with other people more than anything. So Agile was completely new to me. I haven't had to use it before, even though it actually is, to my understanding, pretty industry standard for video games. It's essentially that tool of like, how do you keep track of everybody and make sure somebody else's work isn't blocking somebody else's work up ahead, and like, why is this happening, and like, how do we need to put more resources into it? Does this feature just need more time? It's a really good tool to like use to like understand all of that, so that the engineering aspect of everything can be figured out. So there's kind of like the two parts of that, where like there's like the literal like agile skill of like, okay, I know what all these terms are and I can use them with everybody. And then there's also kind of that like other interpersonal thing that like I had to pick up a lot of during this process, especially when it comes to like in-person work, because like I'm fairly comfortable like talking with people over Discord and like, you know, figuring things out through there, but our team culturally wasn't as adjusted to that as like I am. So like, I think a lot of the skills I had to pick up were like interpersonal, in-person work. How do we get everybody working together and like on the same page on like what features are and all of that? So that's absolutely something I can take away from in the future, like in the field work.
Learning to work with others in a professional environment is a crucial skill as students enter the workforce. Our team learned important lessons about how we approached the design process during this challenge as well.
So I'm going to quote our faculty, Doug Stuckey at the College of Innovation and Design. So he will say that design thinking helps you make sure you're solving the right problem. And then a lot of the agile methodologies or like innovation management methodologies help you solve the problem right. And so it's really, really important that you know what problem you're solving at the beginning, because it saves you time and money. You don't spend as much time like spinning your wheels. And so that goes back to those boundaries that you want to create to foster innovation rather than stifle it. So that's kind of the first part, is you want to make sure you're spending your energy on the right problem. And then the second part is that really at the end of the day, it does not matter how smart you are or how perfect your solution is if you can't tell the story of why it's important. And that we kind of see that across all industries and all disciplines. it's not necessarily like the smartest person in the room that gets the recognition, it's the person that can tell the story the best. And so we try to focus on that quite a bit, mainly because we don't want good solutions to get lost because somebody didn't understand what you were trying to do. It's human-centered design, really. So design thinking helps you ensure that the design remains human-centered, especially once you start building it and, laying down code or hardware, anything like that. It's easy to get caught in the weeds of building it, and then you kind of forget about the end user. And so I think that design thinking and, journey maps and storyboarding really help us to continually come back to how is the user impacted by this? Does it actually help them solve the problem? So that whole process is very iterative, and it needs to be iterative because you inevitably get a little bit off track. Repeating that cycle over and over again helps you come back on track. You evaluate, is this still solving the right problem? Do we need to pivot? That whole process, that whole innovation cycle is what I hope students are really getting out of Suits. And I think that that's really what NASA wants us to get out of Suits also, in addition to all these other technical skills. I think it's important to remember what part of the product cycle you're in also. By the time you have astronauts in space, inside a spaceship, failure's not really an option. Like, ideally, you've tested so much that failure is not going to happen, or at least you have options when there is a failure somewhere. At this point, this very early stage, rapid prototyping, you have to fail because you're trying to get rid of all the bad ideas. And I think that students really do struggle with that because it's such an antithesis to what they are experiencing like in class, because they are students. And so when you have K through 12 and then 18 years of education telling you one thing, which is you want to get as high of a grade as possible, so you want your homework to be as perfect as possible, and then you get thrown into this rapid prototyping environment where failure is actually a good thing because it's kind of back to Thomas Edison saying I found 999 ways to not make a light bulb, and that's just as valuable as the one way that does work.
The first eye-opener for me, when we started doing that, was the journey map, actually. Whenever you come into a project like that, there's so much. You go in so many different directions, but whenever you're saying hey, put yourself in the shoes of the actual target audience of this thing, and then just walk through what a journey for them looks like, and suddenly you get this really, really great perspective on what do I want our product to do. And because of that, I was able to ask myself that question specifically, which is the most important one, is what do I want our product to do? Because then you can start working around okay, this is how this thing's gonna actually work, and this is what features this needs, and we can start thinking about how important each one is, because we have deadlines and we gotta hit them, and we need to figure out what needs to get done first. It was really just that journey map process was really big eye-opener for me as far as that. So now we know what we want to make, so then it's we get into that prototyping phase of okay, how do we show this? I think one mistake we were making is we really didn't spend enough time on paper at first, and we would just jump a little too fast into Figma, only after one meeting or so. But we really needed, what we started to fix was when we started going to coffee shops and working together and talking through issues and how we want to do that, because that's the design that actually got accepted, was the one where we did that process of we drew it out, we talked it over, we debated respectfully, and then we obviously we got along pretty well as a team. So once we started doing that, that's when our designs actually went to that next level, was whenever we did the paper first, and then we went to Figma and got things more solid, because and then because the Figma, it takes time to do that, but the paper, it's I'm drawing rectangles, this is where it's gonna be. I'm a big artist, I love to draw, and I'm really trying to integrate
thumbnails into my process so much more, because if it looks good tiny, and if it's selling the emotions that you want it to sell tiny, then it's going to work big. But you have to make tiny first before you can move on into that big full project. So that was really
such an essential part of it.
We've been talking about the high-level processes for designing our project this semester, and we'll hear from Dameron again soon as he talks us through what Team CosmoShox built and tested at Johnson Space Center. Before we get to that, I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about Test Week. Being on the JSC campus was an unforgettable experience. Walking around the campus and seeing the different buildings, you really get a sense of the history that has taken place there, mixed in with the hopes and promises of what we can do in the future. For instance, we were walking by Building 2 when space history nerd me glimpsed the LLTV, the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle that's on display in that building. I made a point of dropping back through the following day and was treated with being able to check out some artifacts from the earliest days of the space program all the way up to the present day. Most strikingly, though, this building has an incredible mural that was painted by famed space artist Robert McCall. The mural was commissioned by JSC's then director, Christopher Kraft, in 1979. The title of this mural is, quote, "Opening the Space Frontier, the Next Giant Step." I wish that more of us had been able to see this mural during test week. The work that student groups do at colleges around the country help America take these next giant steps into the solar system. I'll include a picture of that mural in the show notes and on the Space Shots website, so please take a moment to check it out if you don't know what I'm talking about. For me personally, the entire week at Johnson Space Center was a treat because you're walking through history and the future every day. That's enough editorializing for now, so we're going to hear from Dameron again to talk about what we worked on for the 2025 Suits Design Challenge. One last quick note too, when Dameron references EV, he means extravehicular crew member in this case.
Let's start with Dust. Dust is called the Digital Unreal Engine Simulation Tool or something along those lines. It's a virtual world that is comprised of like real data of the moon, and then like that data is punched into Unreal Engine. That's a video game engine, and it has really good lighting, but it's all real time. That means it can like you can directly edit it, or like you could walk around in that space and it'll still look really good. So it's a recreation of the lunar South Pole inside of a game engine using real lunar data. And what a lot of our challenge was like using that engine, a rover inside of that engine, and like controlling it and keeping track of it inside of our own program. And that program that we made is called Luna. Luna is a user interface tool that could keep track of both like originally that rover inside of Dust, and then also it can keep track of two EVs, which can be like kind of like real person data as far as like keeping track of somebody's heart rate or like making sure that their suit pressure is all good and things like that. And a lot of our work that we were doing was with Luna, and like we were trying to make it like as what's the term? We were trying to make it like as like reducing cognitive load. Like that was like our main goal for Luna, was how do we reduce as much cognitive load on the user as possible so that they can track, they had a lot of things to track, such as like the data of two EVs, such as their heart rate and like their respiratory rate and their suits, and then as well as their camera feed so that we can see what they're seeing. And then they'd also have to keep track of the rover and make sure that like it can go from point A to point B, and they can actually do some small controlling of the rover inside of it, and then also like making sure that the geological steps are all being followed whenever it's time to get to that. So like the person who's using the Luna UI has like a lot to keep track of. So it's our goal as designers was to make it like as like efficient, like keep them in one area for as long as possible while they're doing their task, so that they aren't like constantly flipping over, or so that they could like get a quick read of like, okay, this is the most important need to know type stuff. So like if somebody's like heart rate was in danger, they would like immediately see it because it's red against everything else being blue, and then they would know, oh, okay, we need to keep track of this data, because it would like immediately jump out to them. Fairly obvious example, but like that's just the kind of work that we were doing, and like making sure that all worked was making sure we had a really smart UI that could like adapt to live data and like make sure that like everything that the EVs were safe, because that's really our main priority, was like safety.
All right, thank you all, and thank you for being here to invest in our students. So we're going to start with our first team. Our first team up is Team CosmoShox from Wichita State University, so please take the floor.
I'll just use this.
Good morning. We are Wichita State University, Team CosmoShox, and we are excited to be with everybody this morning. We're going to kick it off. We have a very interdisciplinary team, everything from aerospace engineering to exercise science, which I think is one of our strengths, and we're going to be talking about that more in a little bit. For this year's design challenge, we were tasked with coming up with a user interface for a pressurized rover that helped astronauts and future users reduce their cognitive load through a unique tabbed system, which Dameron is going to talk about more in just a second.
The final event of Test Week saw schools presenting their designs to a panel of flight controllers, engineers, even an astronaut, and other schools. Wichita State was up first, and we kicked off the end of Test Week with our presentation. Sadly, a PowerPoint error prevented us from showing our user interface video, but Dameron and Janice rocked the presentation pitch. One of the coolest parts of the exit pitch session was the awards that were presented to colleges, and it was announced that Maggie won the Artemis Educator Award.
They introduced the awards last year, and there's 3 awards. 2 awards are designated like during test week based on like design evaluators observations, and then the 3rd award is nominated by the students on the teams. And so the Artemis Educator Award is given to the faculty member who inspires their students to achieve more than they thought possible, and that is based off of student nominations. So obviously it means a lot, because that means that not only was NASA did NASA like give me that award, but that's because you guys on the student team nominated me, and obviously whatever you wrote was very convincing. And so it's very humbling and very validating that the work that we're doing is appreciated. The fun part is that last year's Artemis Award also went to Wichita State's faculty advisor for suits. So that's 2 years in a row that our faculty have been awarded that, which is pretty cool. It evolves. My opinion of what makes a great student-led experience evolves every year as I learn more. But I think it's really heavily based in the idea of servant leadership. So I want to be like a guide or a mentor. So it's like the bumpers in a bowling alley. Like I want to give you guys enough enabling constraints. So I want to give you guys enough boundaries that you can focus on what's important, and you can honestly innovate better with some amount of constraints. And so I try to get that balance just right between like be creative and be crazy and come up with that great new idea, but also let's not spin our wheels too much, because we honestly don't have time. 9 months in the challenge like sounded like a long time, I'm sure, at the beginning, but now that you're at the other side of it, I mean, it was very fast. And I remember talking to other faculty like last year, the year before, trying to get more collaboration and kind of explaining the concept, and the feedback was just like, well, that would take years to build that kind of product. It's like, well, yeah, in a professional setting it does, but that's not what we're doing. We're doing rapid prototyping and innovation, and so the whole idea is what can you build in 6 months or 9 months.
John here again, and I've got an editorial before we end. This is me speaking here as someone who's studied history, space exploration, and technology for a little over a decade now. Here's the thing. Programs like Suits could disappear. The current NASA budget proposal zeroes out NASA STEM engagement programs. Cutting these programs from NASA's budget won't just affect universities, it will affect the workforce pipeline for Artemis and beyond. Sadly, we are already seeing how these cuts are affecting NASA, and most bafflingly, these cuts come at a time when the agency is gearing up for future Artemis missions. If America is serious about returning to the moon and being the first nation to reach the lunar South Pole, Congress must act to restore NASA's budget, and to restore it to a level that represents the reality of the work that the agency does for the American taxpayer. 0.3% of the federal budget is what NASA operates with. This is a tiny amount of money, especially when one considers the outsized impact NASA has on American dynamism. Casey Dreyer with the Planetary Society notes that the Quote, 2026 White House budget directs NASA to send humans to the moon and Mars with the smallest civil servant workforce since fiscal year 1960, which began in the summer of 1959. Dreyer also noted that this level of funding hasn't been seen since before the first American astronaut, Alan Shepard, launched to space. To be completely blunt, this makes no sense. Returning to the moon and going to Mars will not happen with the current budget. America is ceding decades of leadership in space exploration and high-tech fields with our current budget. What I saw while I was in Houston was the energy and dynamism of college kids, future members of our workforce, who thrive in these kinds of high-stakes environments. Suits and NASA design challenges generally are low-cost, high-impact programs that help inspire and develop the workforce of tomorrow. These students are already doing the work. Congress needs to do the work and figure out a budget that enables NASA to continue to do the incredible work the agency is known for around the world. Team CosmoShox went to Johnson Space Center to test our interface, and we came back inspired. This generation of students isn't just dreaming of the moon. Many of us are designing for it. Now, we need America to prioritize the work that's being done to send humans to the lunar South Pole for the first time through the Artemis program. And the technologies we develop for the Artemis program and Mars exploration won't just help us explore space, they'll help us solve problems here on Earth too. Apollo 8 astronaut Bill Anders, who captured the iconic Earthrise photo, once said, quote, "We came all this way to explore the moon, and the most important thing is that we discovered the Earth." As we close, take a moment to imagine what we might discover about our planet and about ourselves as we push beyond the moon in the coming decades.
What I believe history will record that America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow.
Let's rise to the challenge of our time so that our destiny tomorrow is more incredible than we can even imagine today. Thank you to everyone involved with Team CosmoShox this year. To everyone on the 2025 CosmoShox team, thank you. A special shout out to Kai and Alex, our NASA design evaluators, who gave us meaningful feedback that should help the 2026 CosmoShox team do their best work. Also, another thank you to Alex and also Ryan, our mentors and Wichita State alum, for their time and expertise this year. Thank you to our hosts at Johnson Space Center for facilitating an unforgettable week. Lastly, thank you to everyone at Wichita State and in Kansas who made this trip possible. Whether it was time or money or both, thank you. The music for this episode was licensed through Blue Dot Sessions. Full music details are in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know. The format is totally different than anything I've ever done, and it took a lot longer to record and produce. I'd love to hear your feedback, and if you've got ideas for the future, send them to john@thespaceshot.com. One final thank you. A shout out to the Titusville Public Library for giving me a spot to work on the final parts of this episode. When I started recording this episode, I didn't think I would be working on it on the Space Coast, but here we are. That's it for this episode. I'm John Molnix, and I'll catch you on the flip side.